guys, it's CocoKane from Tavern TCG bringing you an interview, which is kind of weird for me. I know, I just thought I'd give it a try. We have today Zack Tufford, our champion from ARG, Florida Championship. Excuse me. Say hi, Zack.
Yo.
I just had a couple of questions for him, and I wanted to give you guys a little insight on the mind of Zack Tufford going into that event and what he had to say about his experience there. Also, I wanted to start off. The people that don't know you, Zack, what are some of your victories and some of your ARGs and other victories championships you got under your belt here?
I won states here in Georgia. I've won 2 or 3 other ARGs here. I've top-aided a number of other ARGs out of state. I won the Indianapolis ARG. I top-aided the Houston WGP back last year. Was just shy of top 8 on back in Providence. I don't know. I've played in so many forcible tournaments now.
So you've got a lot.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to make sure, because a lot of people necessarily don't know your name, but if you do know his name, there you go. That's the reason you should know his name. I wanted to also talk to you about your main deck that most people know you about is your Alice's World that you won a lot of ARGs with. What made you decide not to play that when you went to Orlando?
That was actually the deck I was originally on. We'd playtested with it so much, and it just felt so strong. The only matchup that even really worried me a little bit was Fairies, which is honestly like it's really just a glass cannon. Like,
yeah,
against all the other decks, it can win, but it can be very difficult if the other player is very good, and the deck doesn't recover very well. But as far as Alice's World goes, against Flame Sprite, it's just not fun. They just shoot down all eyes, they untap the Flame Sprites with Reflect. It's a pain to interact with them. Alice's World,
and they keep bouncing them
to begin with.
They have to.
Yeah, it's a pain. But we did a whole bunch of testing once we got to Orlando. We tested all day Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because I really wanted to be sure about my deck choice because I also wasn't really sure what the meta would necessarily look like in Nats because it seemed like it could go a number of different ways, and we haven't really had WGPs lately. We've been in an off season.
Yeah.
And there's only been a number of small ARGs really.
Yeah, not a lot to go from.
Yeah, and even those results, a lot of them are just kind of I think Chaz termed it well, inbred, right? Where, yeah, you play against a lot of the local players, and so you maybe end up playing some stuff that you wouldn't normally play in a larger event. And it gets kind of wonky, and sometimes it skews the results. So we kind of had to take that into account too as best we could. So we tested Alice's World, we tested an Incarnate deck, and we tested Knights. I think those were the main decks that we really tested rigorously. And we liked Incarnate, but after a bunch of testing, World just kind of kept standing on top. And then Quinn showed up, and I played Quinn. I think I only played him in one match, and he managed to 2-1 me. But I was pretty impressed with Knights, and the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the safer strategy going into such an unknown field. And I don't know, generally, when you going into a new format, for instance, you generally try to play something that's a little bit more proactive because you punish people trying to be cute, and you punish people who are running things that are a little too greedy. And that's why, a lot of times, aggro is so good at the beginning of a new format. And this was kind of a similar principle. Even though the format wasn't super new, it could go any which way. And I know that there were still some people kind of experimenting with what they wanted to do. And so it felt safer. As much as I hate to use that word, that was really one of the big things that pushed me in that direction. It felt like it could match Alice's World on power, if not come close. But that it had a better distribution of matchups.
All right, that's cool. I'm honestly, personally, I don't really know what you would call this. Would you call this a mid-range? Would this be an aggro deck? Would this?
It's definitely not an aggro deck. I'd probably put it somewhere around an aggressive mid-range deck. It's got a relatively low curve, but honestly, so do
a lot of one-ups, but reflect.
Yeah, it's honestly, Forcible has been like this for a long time. Even back in the Ebony Prophet days, where Abdul was running rampant. And Flame of the Outer World and Thief Sing first came onto the scene, started tearing things up.
Yeah.
Zeke's and Cake Zone were premier spells. And
everything
you were casting super cheap. And you ran couple Meph maybe, which is a 4-drop. I mean, it's a 15/15 4-drop. That's huge for that amount of mana. And then you might run a Blazer because control was rampant. And other than that, all your spells are really cheap. And that's just kind of been Force of Will, like, the whole time it's really been around. It's just been about, like, mana efficiency, cheap spells. It honestly reminds me a little bit of, like, Vintage and Legacy for Magic. But, yeah, I don't know. I think this kind of deck, it doesn't necessarily look to just grind out the opponent. So it's not quite control, even though Reflect kind of has that aspect to it. And it doesn't necessarily want to go to the mid game. It just really has that kind of capability. But I think you can kind of see it in my last game in the finals, actually, where I was on the play. And I wound up, like, I think I judged on, like, 3 stones, and I just kind of, like, ran out Lancelot's and Gerdas, and, you know, just bashed for a bunch of damage and flipped Reflect pretty aggressively to just kind of leverage my position. And so, in that sense, the deck can be hyper aggressive, but at the same time, a lot of the games, even against the other red decks, wind up taking a little bit, and you just kind of make some trades, play some dudes, you know, get something onto the board, get in for some damage. You know, try to attrition them out a little bit. It's just, you know, honestly, Reflect makes everything a grind.
Yeah, right. All right. My other question for you would be like, I noticed that you and Quinn and Josh all ran very similar decks. What were your card? I mean, the reason you made the choices you made on some of the cards, I noticed they made some similar deck choices, but a couple of differences.
So I actually stayed in a different hotel than the rest of the team. Because back at States, I had actually for winning States, I had won a condo for nationals. So me and a bunch of friends wound up just kind of rooming in there, and we tested there. Although we did meet up with the rest of Team Tavern to test for a little bit, and that was where I picked up the initial Knights list. And then after some testing, I made some edits and I put some stuff in, and then we
made
all
it Zack. Made it a little Zack.
Yeah. We all met, let's see, Saturday morning right before the event, and we were talking a bunch, and we looked over each other's deck lists, and we realized that some things had changed, and, you know, some things were, like, similar. We had changed some things to be the same, and some things were very different. And I don't think he was running Barrier in the main. I believe that he wound up kind of YOLOing that, and he's like, you know, I could see that being pretty good, and he put that in. I kind of did the same thing with Glimpse. I wasn't really too on board with it at first, but they're like, nah, man, Glimpse of Kaguya is worth that. The one of is just pulling people out. I'm like,
those were 2 clutch cards for you in the tournament.
I think Barrier a lot more than Glimpse. But
I remember those both coming in very good play for you in the kind of games that I watched.
So Glimpse showed up a couple times, and the few times that I played it, it was quite good. Usually because when I played it, I specifically wanted it, and half the time I just go tutor for it. And, you know, obviously, like, that's the best time to do it. You tutor for it at the exact perfect time, and you play it, and you get the most out of the spell. But I think Glimpse was more funny than anything. I actually played against a good friend of mine. I sincerely hope he watches this. In fact, I'm going to go tell him to watch this just so he sees it, because I know he'll freak out. But I played against him in Swiss, and he had actually beat me in Swiss at a local ARG here. I was playing Alice's World, and he was playing Dark Alice because he just never likes to run the meta deck. It's just how he is. And I resolve an Alice's World, I cast an Alice's World. I'm like, all right, I think that this will kind of get me back on track. I think I can build up from here and win. And he's got, like, the one card in hand that he drew off the top of his deck, and he kick zones me. And I'm just like, I start, like, flipping out. I'm like, who even runs that? What are you doing? And so I played against him in Swiss at Nationals, and he goes to God's Art me, and I tutor up a Glimpse of Kaguya, and I glimpse his God's Art. Nice. So that was pretty fantastic. I don't really ever get tired of telling that story. Mostly because of his reaction, which I know he'll have when he hears this, even though I won't actually get to see the reaction. But I liked Barrier a little bit more. Barrier just, man, you see
damage.
All these, like, triple orb hands, and they just, like, run the orbs out, and they're like, it's so good. And it is, until your opponent casts a Barrier, and then your orbs don't do a whole lot. Because you're not going to, you know, tap a mana, or tap 3 mana every turn to keep putting counters on orbs, and it slows down Judgment. And it's especially brutal when I'm on the play and I cast Barrier, and, you know, they're already behind a stone, and maybe they had to judge defensively or something to try to slow me down. Who knows?
Play an orb so they can have a Ruler's Memoria.
Yeah, and just like, man, barrier coming down. It's also good against Artemis. Not that that came up a ton. It's just it's really a pain, especially game one, because nobody really ran anything for barrier in the main board, if they even ran anything for barrier at all. And so it was honestly kind of clutch. I wasn't like crazy about it, but it was very good. It definitely paid off.
Were there any cards that were almost good enough, like almost made the cut?
As in just didn't quite make it to
like
the main
you
deck?
wanted it in the main. Yeah, you wanted it in the deck, just maybe didn't make it. Just possibly made. Just a question. Because sometimes there's those good cards you can't quite fit.
I don't think so. Like, I think the closest thing to that was toying with the numbers. Because the numbers got really weird. Like, I ended up running like 2 Flame King Shout, and I really wanted 3, but I was just trying to make room for everything, and it got a little awkward. And I don't know. That's really the closest to it. The fact that I was able to like squeeze in the glimpse the morning of, and I think I actually threw in the barriers the night before. They were a buddy's idea. There were a few cards throughout testing that were good, but still kind of performing a little under the level where I wanted them to be. And so those first few initial cuts for those tech cards were pretty easy. And then after that, it was just, like I said, toying with the numbers. So I think pretty much everything that I wanted in the main board, I was able to squeeze in.
All right. Well, my last question for you mostly would be, do you think that Reflect is broken in now that was going to be post errata? Now that we have this errata, also, what do you think about it? Do you think it makes it level? Do you think it made it okay and even playing, or it's still too good?
So I can't say. It's tough, right? Because I haven't gotten to playtest with the ruler post errata just yet. I've just been busy doing some other stuff, but I can't say that I'm crazy about the errata. Honestly, I know that a lot of people kind of had a sigh of relief when it came out because they were just so sick of Reflect and Reflect's nonsense. They just wanted something done about it, and I can understand where people like that are coming from. I really can. Honestly, there's just the cards are very
good.
degenerate. There's no two ways about it. It's ridiculous, and if it weren't like over the edge already, Change the World certainly puts it there. Change the World is also just absolutely absurd. But I don't really know if this was the way to go. I like that the company did something about it instead of just trying to sweep it under the rug. But I think one of my biggest fears regarding this errata is that it seems to me like it might make it a little bit more difficult to win when you lose the die roll, because now all of a sudden, even though you can theoretically crack back and like kill the opponent's lance and they can't like pump in response when you're swinging with your lance, it still just seems very difficult. One of the nice things about being on the draw, or really one of the only nice things about being on the draw, with Reflect was that you would get an extra cycle, so you get an extra look, which is nice, and it's just they still get like all the utility of like the pump for extra damage when they're on the play, with just the hyper aggression. God help you if they start turn 1 Cthulhu once again. It's tough. That's kind of like my initial feeling, but at the same time, I can kind of see a world where maybe you being able to kill their Lancelot with yours or your Gerda or whatever might slow down the game a little bit, because there is a very real there's very real risk involved in leaving a lance on board. It's very dangerous. So I'm not sure that they can afford that. I would really need to play with it to see how things would pan out. It's kind of hard to like.
So you definitely think they depowered the card?
What?
Definitely think they depowered that card.
Yes, but I think it's still probably the best ruler out there. I think it's still just the strongest, honestly.
Still worth
again, playing. Like I'll play test with it, but I don't think that this is enough to convince me to not play it. It's just very, very good. I will say, however, I do think that this change probably kills Alice's World. I don't think that Alice's World can really operate on, arguably like technically like half the counters, even though it's not quite right because you've still got Change the Worlds and stuff. But yeah, Alice's World really needed all of its counters, and even more so, it really needed the ability to cycle on each turn and abuse Morgiana like that as well. So without being able to cycle, both turns. You don't get to abuse Morgiana is bad. The pump gets really awkward, right? And all of a sudden, I play Elvish Priest, and you can just thunder it in your draw step, and I can't pump to respond. That's really weird. It's just it's awkward. I think is the best way to put it, and I think that's probably going to be enough to kind of knock Alice's World off its rocker, as sad as it makes me to say. But it's probably a good thing. I don't know if the deck really needed to exist. The deck is really, really dumb.
It's a little weird, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we should really have the capability to just power out turn 2 Wyvers willy-nilly.
Or take, like, a bunch of turns in a row and just let your opponent sit there and wait.
Yeah. I really do love the deck, and it was really nice getting to play something that wasn't just, like, red aggro or anything, any, like, permutation of that. But, I don't know. I do think that if we were to take any step towards balancing the format, Alice's World would have to probably be out of the picture.
Right.
So, at the very least, like, that's a good start.
All right. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. I just wanted to get a couple of questions, peek in that brain of yours, and hopefully you got the viewers at home got a lot of the insight from Zack Tufford here from Team Tavern.
Yep.
I'm CocoKane from Tavern TCG, and hope you guys had a wonderful time.